In a vast agricultural region, wild boar herds began appearing more and more frequently. Contrary to what many people assume, they did not move in a chaotic manner. Instead, they often split into smaller groups, approaching from different directions while maintaining clear coordination. Within a short period of time, freshly rooted patches of soil started appearing throughout the crop rows, signaling the presence of animals that were steadily expanding their range of activity.
But when they're doing this in your crop fields, that's a big problem.
As their numbers increased, the impact became more noticeable. The soil was torn apart, leaving long stretches of disturbed ground across the fields. Crops began to lean and eventually collapse onto the ground. Although the damage was not yet severe during the early stages, the continuous appearance of fresh signs made it clear that this was no longer isolated activity. An organized group of wild boars was gradually turning the area into a regular feeding ground. Each visit left behind additional sections of disrupted land that farmers had to spend considerable time repairing to confirm what was happening. The area was surveyed from the air. From a helicopter's perspective, the rooting damage appeared as long trails stretching across fields and grasslands. These signs did not exist independently, but connected together to form clearly defined travel corridors. Certain locations showed a much higher concentration of activity than others, indicating frequent gathering points for the herd. When compared with footage collected from trail cameras, the movement routes matched almost perfectly. These findings made it possible to identify the exact locations the boars used most often. Rather than applying control measures across a wide area, attention was focused on the most important travel corridors. These were the locations where contact with the entire herd was most likely. Understanding their movement patterns not only saved time, but also significantly improved the effectiveness of the management strategy that followed. Based on the routes that had been identified, a trapping system was positioned directly along the corridors most frequently used by the herd. The surrounding environment was left largely unchanged to avoid creating anything unusual that might raise suspicion. Instead of forcing the boars to alter their behavior, the entire system was designed to blend naturally into the landscape, encouraging them to continue following their established routines. The goal was not to make them wary, but to ensure everything appeared completely familiar. Next, bait was distributed in small amounts in the outer areas, leading gradually toward the center of the trap. This arrangement created a natural pathway that the boars could easily follow. The main food source was placed in the center, where it would have the strongest attraction. Over time, the location slowly became a familiar feeding site. Their initial caution began to fade as they repeatedly returned without encountering any signs of danger. Once the acclimation process was complete, larger numbers of boars began visiting the bait site. At first, only a few individuals entered to investigate. After determining that the area appeared safe, others quickly followed. The number of animals inside increased in waves until most of the herd had gathered around the central food source. This was also the most suitable moment to carry out the final stage of the plan. Every previous step had been designed to create this critical opportunity. Soon as the majority of the herd was inside the controlled area, the system was activated. The exits were quickly blocked, preventing the animals from leaving. The entire setup was then carefully monitored to ensure the operation proceeded in a stable and controlled manner. Reducing wild boar numbers significantly decreased pressure on agricultural land while lowering the risk of repeated damage in the future. If you found this story interesting, leave a comment and share your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more wildlife stories from around the world. For generations, wild hogs have devastated crops, outsmarted farmers, and pushed through countless barriers built to stop them. But amid years of frustration and relentless field research, farmers gradually uncovered methods so effective that wildlife experts are still studying them today. Some of these strategies work in ways that are not immediately obvious. Others are surprisingly simple. And stay with us until the end, because the final method completely changed how people fight back against these destructive animals. In October 2023, a rice and corn farmer in Chambers County, Texas, witnessed something that completely changed the way he viewed wild hogs. In a single night, his surveillance cameras recorded a sounder of 58 feral hogs entering his field at exactly 11:42 p.m. By sunrise, more than 60% of his crops had been destroyed. According to reports from Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, the damage was estimated at nearly $38,000. Wildlife biologists describe wild hogs as animals that are willing to accept high risks for high rewards. When calorie-rich food sources such as corn, rice, or peanuts are available, their feeding instincts often overpower their caution. An adult boar weighing around 200 pounds can consume more than 13 pounds of food per day. That enormous energy demand pushes them into places that most other animals would avoid. For decades, farmers tried nearly every possible solution, from fencing and floodlights to noise-based deterrents. Over time, modern trapping strategies began to emerge. Instead of trying to scare hogs away, farmers created bait sites that gradually guided them toward large traps. After returning night after night, the animals became comfortable with the location. By the time they entered the trap area, they no longer viewed it as a threat. In their minds, it was simply the most reliable food source they had found. That was when researchers discovered something important. Fear was not the deciding factor. Wild hogs have limited vision, and while their sense of smell is highly developed, it can be influenced by familiar scents. The real key turned out to be timing. That breakthrough became clear in September 2022 when multiple farms across South Texas, working with the Caesar Claiborne Wildlife Research Institute, deployed trap monitoring systems equipped with infrared cameras. After months of observation, researchers found that wild hogs did not move randomly. Most feeding activity occurred between 10:30 p.m. and 2:15 a.m., and more than 70% of crop raids took place during that narrow window. The findings quickly changed how farmers operated their traps. Rather than capturing the first hogs to arrive, they waited until the entire sounder gathered inside.
Thank you, sir. What's really interesting here.
In one documented case from November 2023, a farmer watched a group of 26 hogs enter a baited trap area at 11:58 p.m. He continued to wait and did not trigger the trap until 12:07 a.m., when every animal was fully focused on feeding. The result was remarkable. The entire sounder was captured in less than 10 seconds. That story highlights an important lesson in the battle against wild hogs. Success does not come from building bigger traps, stronger fences, or more intimidating deterrents. It comes from understanding exactly how these animals think, move, and make decisions. Once farmers shifted from direct confrontation to working with the natural behavior of wild hogs, the balance began to change. Sometimes, the most powerful tool in the field is not the trap itself, but the patience to activate it at precisely the right moment.
A massive black bear suddenly appeared right beside the wooden fence behind the farm before dawn had fully broken. Within minutes, it tore apart several livestock feed containers before disappearing into the thick fog long before anyone could react. But what worried people most was not the damage caused that night. Huge footprints found continuously around the area for many days showed that the bear had returned many times before. It no longer wandered randomly through the forest like ordinary bears. It had begun learning how to approach the farm using the exact same trail every time, always appearing during the quietest hours and vanishing before any lights were turned on. In the mountainous regions of Northern America, wildlife control teams understand exactly how dangerous this can become. Once a fully grown bear becomes accustomed to food sources near human settlements, it will return more and more frequently. Over time, the boundary between the deep forest and residential areas almost disappears. Livestock farmers repeatedly discovered storage doors torn open, garbage bins overturned, and deep claw marks carved into trees right beside living areas. Several infrared cameras installed along the trail finally captured footage of the bear appearing in the middle of the night. It did not behave like a frightened animal. It looked more like something that had become far too familiar with the place. The very next morning, the control team began surveying the entire area surrounding the farm. They were not searching for the bear through noise or the freshest tracks. What they needed was to understand exactly how it moved. Large footprints appeared near a dry creek before disappearing into the pine forest behind the hill. One specialist quickly realized that the bear always avoided open spaces and moved only through dense forest corridors where light could barely pass through. That made direct pursuit almost useless. If the bear detected human presence too early, it could completely change its route and vanish deep into the wilderness for weeks. Instead of placing traps near the farm as usual, they decided to build a massive steel trap system deeper inside the forest. This was not the kind of trap that relied on violent force or loud mechanical noise. The entire structure was designed to resemble a natural tunnel, with dark steel panels blended carefully into the surrounding environment. Inside, they placed only a small amount of strong-smelling bait to encourage the bear to move farther in without sensing danger. Most importantly, the trap door remained fixed and inactive during the first several days. For nearly an entire week, infrared cameras continuously recorded the bear appearing around the trap area. On the first night, it simply stood at a distance for a long time before leaving. On the second night, it moved several meters closer before suddenly turning back toward the deep forest. It was not until the fifth night that the bear finally began stepping inside the steel enclosure. But even then, it constantly paused to smell the air and inspect every small movement around it. The moment the heavy steel door suddenly slammed shut in the silent darkness, the entire forest shook from a violent impact. The bear immediately lunged forward with terrifying strength, causing the entire steel frame to tremble violently. But the anchored system beneath the ground held firmly in place. After several minutes of relentless struggling, the animal slowly began to calm down before standing motionless inside the pitch-black trap, its breath turning into streams of white vapor in the freezing air. As daylight slowly emerged, the thick fog behind the pine forest gradually faded away, revealing the massive steel trap resting silently in the middle of the clearing. For many people living near the forests in North America, this was not simply a story about capturing a wild bear. It reflected the increasingly tense conflict between humans and wildlife as the boundaries of survival continue to shrink. Wildlife control teams understand that they can never completely erase the instincts of nature. The only thing they can do is try to preserve that fragile balance before both humans and animals are forced to pay the price.
Good job, eh?
Feral hogs are not just wild animals living out in grasslands or deep forests. In many parts of the United States, especially in Texas, they have become a real ecological and economic disaster. Every year, they cause hundreds of millions of dollars in agricultural damage, destroying crops, tearing up pastures, knocking down fences, contaminating water sources, and directly threatening livestock. What makes the problem even more alarming is how quickly they reproduce. If even a small population is left unchecked, feral hog numbers can surge after just a few breeding seasons, spreading damage across the agricultural map like an oil spill. To respond to this crisis, the U.S. Department of Agriculture launched the Feral Swine Control Pilot Program, with tens of millions of dollars in funding to support the states hit hardest by the problem. Among them, Texas has always been seen as the epicenter, because it has vast open land, countless ranches, wild areas mixed with residential zones, and conditions that are almost perfect for feral hogs to multiply. But even as federal and state funding continues to flow in, the heaviest burden still falls on landowners. They have to pay out of pocket to build fences, set traps, hire crews, install cameras, and repair the damage left behind after feral hogs sweep through their land overnight. Among today's control methods, feral hog trapping is considered one of the most important strategies. Many trap systems are designed as large circular or square enclosures, wide enough for an entire sounder to enter without feeling threatened. Inside the trap, fermented corn or other strong-smelling bait is often placed for several nights in a row to draw them in. In the early stage, the trap gate is usually kept open so the hogs can get used to the area. They walk in and out naturally, feed on the bait, leave tracks behind, and slowly drop their guard. This is the most critical step, because if the trap is triggered too early, the entire plan can fail. Remote surveillance cameras act like the eyes of the control team. From a phone or tablet, landowners can watch every movement inside the trap and trigger it only when the entire sounder has entered. At the right moment, the heavy gate drops, seals off the exit, and holds the whole group inside within seconds. One perfectly timed trigger can prevent months of damage across an entire ranch.
Okay, we're setting the boar blanket up.
In addition to traditional drop gate traps, many areas also use passive net traps, a method highly valued because it takes advantage of the hog's natural behavior. Instead of creating an obvious gate that might make them suspicious, this system uses soft netting, steel posts, and tension lines to form a large enclosure. At first, the net is raised so the hogs can move freely inside to feed. After several nights of observation, once they have learned the route and no longer sense danger, the net is lowered close to the ground. Feral hogs can still push their way inside by using their snouts and natural rooting behavior, but once they are in, the structure of the net makes it extremely difficult for them to find a way back out. However, even with the most advanced traps, Texas still has not been able to fully solve its feral hog problem. They reproduce too quickly, spread across too much territory, and can survive in many different environments, from forests and grasslands to wetlands and suburban edges. If control efforts are not maintained continuously, Even a few remaining sounders can be enough for the population to rebound quickly. That is why feral hog trapping is not a one-time solution, but part of a long-term strategy that combines surveillance, land management, and community coordination. The story in Texas is not just about an animal destroying crops. It is a reminder of what happens when an invasive species grows beyond control, when ecological balance is broken, and when humans are forced to respond with technology, money, and patience. Smart traps can hold an entire sounder of feral hogs in a single night, but the bigger question still remains. Can humans truly control nature, or are we simply chasing the consequences created by that imbalance?
David, I believe this one's a plate. Yeah, she's hurt a little bit. We're doing a good job, eh? I guess. And it doesn't seem as many when you stack them tight. Yeah. But
Wild boars have long been one of the most destructive invasive animals in many parts of Canada. In Alberta, the problem has become increasingly concerning as wild boar sounders continue to appear near residential communities and agricultural land. The damage they cause is estimated to exceed $800,000 annually. As natural food sources become scarcer, groups of 20 to 50 animals are moving deeper into areas where people live. They rummage through garbage bins, damage landscapes, and leave behind contaminated areas that have become a growing concern for local residents. In the early stages, many communities chose to build protective fencing. Heavy-duty galvanized steel fences were designed to provide long-lasting protection, often remaining effective for decades. Each system was carefully installed to prevent wild boars from entering homes, gardens, and public living spaces. However, construction costs were substantial, and maintaining these barriers required continuous time, effort, and financial investment. Even so, fences only remained effective for a limited period. Wild boars are highly adaptable animals. They constantly observe their surroundings and quickly learn how to overcome new obstacles. In many locations, fences that once worked well gradually lost their effectiveness as the animals altered their travel routes or discovered weaknesses in the protection systems. As a result, wildlife managers were forced to search for more proactive control methods. After years of testing, net trapping systems began to emerge as one of the most effective solutions. Unlike fences, which only act as barriers, net traps directly reduce wild boar populations in affected areas. According to numerous reports, the widespread use of these systems has contributed to significant population declines in certain regions of Canada. However, to maintain ecological balance and comply with regulations, all control operations must be carried out under the supervision of authorized wildlife agencies. The nets themselves are constructed from high tensile strength materials capable of withstanding the impact of large adult boars. To increase success rates, operators use highly attractive bait with strong scents. One of the most common formulas consists of fermented corn mixed with specially selected additives. After several days of fermentation, the mixture produces an odor powerful enough to attract wild boars from considerable distances, encouraging them to return repeatedly to the trap site. When a sounder enters the baited area, the unique design of the net system begins to work. Part of the net is positioned close to the ground, creating the illusion that an escape route remains open ahead. Once the animals move deeper inside, however, they quickly become confined. The harder they attempt to escape, the more entangled they become within the net structure. This mechanism significantly increases the likelihood of capturing large groups at once rather than catching individual animals one at a time. After a trap is activated, control teams must inspect the site regularly to ensure timely management. Many operators report that a single successful deployment can capture anywhere from dozens to hundreds of wild boars. Most operations take place at night because that is when the animals are most active. Once the process is complete, all captured animals are collected and handled in accordance with current regulations. Special provisions regarding pregnant females and nursing mothers are also followed to minimize long-term impacts on ecological balance. The battle against wild boars in Alberta is far from over, but years of experience have demonstrated that understanding the behavior of these animals is far more important than simply building additional barriers. When behavior-based management strategies are applied correctly, they can achieve results that greatly surpass traditional approaches. If you found this story informative, leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more fascinating stories about wildlife and conservation.
Tries to combat that cost by helping landowners trap the feral hogs.
Wild boars are no longer just wild animals that appear along forest edges or abandoned land. In many states across the United States, they have become a major threat to agriculture, the environment, and rural life. Texas alone is now home to about 3 million wild boars, causing more than $670 million in agricultural damage each year, not including control and repair costs. They tear through crops, destroy fences, damage pastures and water sources, compete with native wildlife for food, and increase the risk of spreading disease to livestock. If even a small group is left unchecked, they can spread rapidly after just a few breeding seasons, turning a local problem into a much larger crisis.
Once more.
In response to this growing threat, the U.S. government has had to roll out large-scale control programs to reduce the pressure wild boars place on agriculture and ecosystems. One of the most important efforts is the Feral Swine Control Pilot Program, supported by the USDA with a total budget of $75 million for heavily affected states. In the first round alone, more than $16.7 million was allocated to 20 projects across 10 states. Texas is considered the center of the crisis because of its vast land area, dense network of farms, and wild boar populations that have spread across many different types of terrain. Texas does not rely only on federal funding. The state also draws support from state agencies, agricultural organizations, private landowners, and professional control teams. Each year, landowners in Texas are reported to spend about $130 million on fencing, monitoring equipment, damage repair, and trapping efforts. But even as investment continues to grow, success remains difficult. For many ranchers and farmers, wild boar control has become a regular part of life because they are not just dealing with a destructive animal, but with a highly flexible population that can adapt, avoid danger, and change its travel routes after every disturbance. In modern control strategies, smart traps are considered one of the most important tools. Instead of placing traps at random, control teams use cameras, motion sensors, and remote monitoring devices to study the habits of each sounder for several days. They track when the boars appear, the paths they use, and how the group approaches a food source. The key is not to trigger the trap too early. If only a few animals are caught, the rest quickly become cautious and may avoid the area altogether. That is why the goal is not to remove individual boars one by one, but to wait for the right moment and capture the entire sounder at once. This patience is what makes smart traps far more effective than scattered control methods used in the past. Alongside large round trapping systems, many areas in Texas still use steel box traps to handle smaller groups of wild boars or sounders that often appear near residential areas. These traps work well in narrow locations where large systems are difficult to set up or where the safety of people and livestock must be protected. Control teams usually place them near familiar travel routes, creek banks, feeding areas, or fresh rooting signs. During the first few days, they allow the boars to get used to the trap and the food inside. Once the group begins entering regularly, the system is triggered at the right moment. Although smaller than massive corral traps, box traps still play an important role in Texas's layered control strategy. Yet even with more advanced technology and growing control budgets, Texas still cannot claim victory over wild boars. They reproduce quickly, travel across wide areas, adapt well, and learn from every close escape. One area may reduce its numbers, only for another sounder to appear somewhere else. Once one route is blocked, they immediately find another path through the woods, along creek beds, or across quiet land where few people go. That is why this battle is not just about traps, fences, or money. It also reveals the limits of human control when an invasive species has already moved beyond the original boundaries of management. And after everything, one question still remains. Are we truly controlling nature, or are we only chasing the consequences we created ourselves?
No one truly believed a wild boar herd that large could exist until the cameras captured the entire scene. After last week's feral hog control operation around my farm, things had finally started to settle down again. The fields were no longer being torn apart every night. The fences were no longer being smashed down, and I began to think I might finally get a little rest. But then an unexpected phone call dragged everything right back to the beginning. At my uncle's farm, hundreds of kilometers away, another herd of feral hogs had started appearing in growing numbers, and the destruction was even worse than before. Huge tracks stretched across the fields. The ground had been ripped open into massive patches, and the crops were nearly wiped out after only a few nights. What worried us most was that these feral hogs no longer seemed afraid of people. They were showing up even before dark, moving in large groups as if they had become completely familiar with the land surrounding the farm. We decided to deploy the traps that very same day. The first trap was set along the edge of a pine forest, where the heaviest signs of movement had been found. This time, I chose to use a net trap instead of a steel cage. With large herds constantly on the move, the net trap felt more natural and far less suspicious than a fully enclosed steel frame. After scattering bait around the area, the entire team quickly pulled back to a distant observation point. We barely had to wait long. As the evening light began to fade, the first dark shapes emerged between the trees. One by one, the wild boar stepped out cautiously, sniffing the air nonstop before slowly moving toward the bait. At first, only a few smaller hogs entered the trap zone, but before long the entire herd came flooding in. They shoved against each other searching for food, completely unaware that the netting was already surrounding them. Only when an entire herd suddenly turned around did the real panic erupt. Piercing squeals exploded through the forest as they slammed violently into the netting in search and escape, but every exit had already been sealed shut. The next location was an open field far from the edge of the forest. With no trees for cover, the herd became far more cautious. They kept appearing in the distance before disappearing back into the darkness. We were forced to leave the trap active overnight. The next morning, when we returned to check it, several wild boars had already been caught inside. The moment they noticed people approaching, the entire herd instantly went berserk, crashing into one another in desperation. But the thick netting was soft enough to absorb the impact, while still strong enough to hold them completely in place. In the western woods near the farm, we tried a different type of trap. This one was a massive steel cage with a front entrance covered by such simple netting that it barely drew any attention at all. Ironically, that simplicity was exactly what lowered the herd's guard. Drawn in by the smell of food inside, they followed one another into the cage without realizing the entrance only worked one way. It was only when they tried to turn and flee that they discovered the way and had already become the perfect trap. By noon, we checked the final trap in the southern section of the forest and were shocked to discover that most of the animals trapped inside were piglets. They crowded together, constantly running in circles within the cramped space, creating a chaotic scene unlike anything we had seen before. This was no longer just about catching a few animals destroying crops. It was proof that the entire herd was reproducing at a terrifying rate. Once the operation was over, the hardest part finally began, moving each animal from the traps onto the trucks. The tight spaces made them more aggressive than ever. The sounds of violent impacts, pounding footsteps, and relentless charges pushed the situation to an extreme level of tension. When the final truck finally pulled away, the area surrounding the farm slowly returned to silence. Standing in the middle of the freshly cleared field, I realized that while the adult hogs could be controlled, the appearance of the young ones was a true sign that this cycle was only just beginning.
Amid the remote mountains covered with pine and birch forests in northern Canada, autumn was slowly giving way to the first bitter days of winter. During the day, the forest still held its quiet beauty, with dry leaves rustling beneath the hooves of deer and thin layers of mist drifting between the towering trees. But once night fell, the residents of the small logging camp near the edge of the woods began hearing strange sounds. Metal containers being dragged across the ground, heavy scratching against the food storage shed, and at times the massive shadow of a large creature moving beneath the faint yellow lights. The bear did not appear overly aggressive, but it was becoming increasingly bold. At first, there were only large footprints pressed into the damp soil. Then came overturned trash bins and broken wooden fences. The people living near the forest understood that if the situation was not handled quickly, the animal would gradually grow accustomed to human food sources and become even more dangerous in the future. Local authorities soon contacted the wildlife management team to organize a safe capture operation. Unlike the harsh methods commonly used many years ago, the control team chose a more cautious and humane approach this time. Their goal was to capture one specific adult bear that had repeatedly returned to the residential area, rather than disturb the entire wildlife habitat. Infrared cameras were attached to tree trunks, motion sensors were placed along the trails the bear frequently used, and all data was monitored continuously throughout several nights. As they reviewed the footage, the team realized the bear was extremely intelligent. It usually appeared close to midnight, avoided brightly lit areas, and always paused for a long time to observe its surroundings before approaching any food source. On one occasion, it detected the metallic scent from an old trap and immediately turned away. That discovery forced the team to change their strategy, minimizing all traces of human presence and placing the trap in a more natural-looking location. A large cage trap was set up near a small stream deep in the forest, where many fresh footprints had recently been found. Inside, the team placed honey, berries, and dried salmon, scents that were highly attractive yet still natural to the environment. Before leaving, the staff covered the trap frame with pine branches and forest soil to conceal any remaining metallic smell. That night, cold winds swept through the treetops, filling the forest with endless rustling sounds. From the monitoring screens inside their specialized vehicle, the control team watched the massive figure of the bear slowly emerge beneath the dim moonlight. It moved carefully, occasionally standing on its hind legs to sniff the air before lowering its head back toward the ground. The animal's caution left the entire team watching almost breathlessly. The bear circled the trap several times before finally approaching the entrance. It hesitated for a few seconds, its eyes constantly scanning the dark forest around it, before eventually being drawn in by the scent of food. The moment its entire body entered the cage, the sensor instantly activated the closing mechanism. The steel door dropped firmly yet smoothly, avoiding any loud noise that might send the animal into panic. Immediately afterward, the control team moved in quickly. Maintaining a safe distance, they used soft lighting to avoid agitating the bear while performing an initial health check. The animal appeared tense for the first few minutes before gradually calming down. After being lightly sedated, it was transported to a protected reserve dozens of kilometers away from the residential area, where natural food sources were abundant and the risk of human contact was much lower. The following morning, the logging camp was quiet once again. The large footprints around the fences had disappeared, and no strange sounds echoed through the night anymore. Beneath the pale morning sunlight filtering through the mist-covered forest, everything seemed to return to its proper place. The bear continued its life in the wild, while the people learned once again that protecting communities and respecting nature can exist side by side when guided by responsibility and understanding. From forests located close to production areas, wild boar herds began to appear with increasing frequency. They typically moved across open fields, field edges, and crop zones before quickly dispersing in different directions. Each herd consisted of about 3 to nearly 10 animals traveling in a fairly clear line before moving deeper into agricultural areas. Residents frequently observed the herds crossing fields both day and night. Within a short time, many production zones began to suffer heavy damage. Some herds returned to the same locations for many consecutive days, gradually expanding their range into surrounding areas. It did not take long for the damage to spread widely. Large patches of land in the fields were dug up, leaving long trenches after each passage of the herds. Rows of crops were repeatedly trampled, leaving many areas almost unable to recover in the short term. What made the situation worse was that the boars often returned to the same previously damaged locations. In areas near residential zones, gardens and lawns were also heavily churned up after each appearance. The damage kept recurring across multiple production sites, while the affected area gradually expanded outward from the original zone. As the destruction continued to increase, monitoring operations were deployed to determine the exact movement routes of the herds. Cameras and observation devices were placed around areas where footprints and feeding activity were frequently detected. Helicopters continuously flew over heavily affected zones to monitor from above. From this vantage point, familiar movement routes gradually became visible between open fields and previously damaged farmland. The monitoring team continued tracking the paths commonly used by the herds, identifying suitable locations for deploying trap systems in the next phase. After the movement routes were clearly identified, trap systems were deployed directly at several key locations. Some circular traps were installed in open areas to contain multiple animals at once. In addition, rectangular traps were placed along narrow passages between fields and crop zones. Steel frames were firmly anchored into the ground to withstand strong impacts when the herds panicked inside. Trap doors were kept fully open to make entry appear natural to the animals. After completing the main structure, bait was placed deep inside to draw the herds fully into the controlled area. Over the following nights, the entire area around the traps was continuously monitored using cameras and night vision equipment. The first animals approached the bait area cautiously and often stopped several times before moving closer. They circled the edge of the traps briefly before eventually entering. Once no danger was detected, the animals behind quickly followed in small successive groups. The number of animals inside the traps gradually increased after each continuous movement of the herd. Soon after, most of the herd began gathering around the food area, significantly reducing their level of alertness. As soon as the appropriate moment arrived, the entire trap system was activated almost simultaneously. Steel doors slammed shut extremely quickly, sealing all exits before the herd could react. Within seconds, the area descended into chaos as the trapped animals rushed in different directions trying to escape. Some animals collided forcefully with the steel frames, but still could not break the firmly fixed structure. In many cases, additional surrounding traps were triggered in sequence to prevent the herd from dispersing in other directions. After the control process was completed, the wild boar herd was stabilized inside the system before being transported out of the production area. As the herd size decreased, the level of agricultural damage pressure gradually declined over time. Many previously damaged areas slowly returned to a more stable condition.